Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there everyone, it's Richard Heisman's here. Hopefully you can hear me all. Can you perhaps let me know perhaps in the chat that you can hear me? Oh, fantastic, thanks. Okay, so welcome to this seminar or webinar on LinkedIn for research translation. Basically we're going to cover off what we think how LinkedIn can be used for research translation. So I guess the first question is why LinkedIn? Sorry. There we go. I guess from our perspective, it's about opportunities to stand out. It cuts down the time that you spend looking for partners. Sorry, I'm just struggling to get the slides to progress.
I can do that.
Yeah. So I think it should halve the time you spend looking for industry partners. It definitely can increase the chances of getting funding opportunities by both increasing your eligibility for receiving grants as well as to get direct industry funding. And it can also stand out from other researchers, help you get better connections, engage with industry in a way that they're used to engaging with other collaborators, not just through perhaps other means like online or face-to-face or phone calls. From what I see though in working with researchers in trying to connect with industry, there are 6 problems that prevent meaningful university industry engagement. The first one, and I guess the most obvious one, is how do we identify industry partners? The question is, how do we get people that are interested in our work? Supposedly there are lots of corporations out there that are interested, but for whatever reason it seems like all the ones that we think might be useful are not necessarily interested in connecting with us. The next problem that I see is confidence. Confidence to deal with people who perhaps want to come to you and ask your expertise, or confidence to put your ideas forward, or perhaps it's confidence to, or courage to put yourself in the line or on the line to be critiqued. Then once you've got partners, or you've got someone interested in the work that you'd like to talk about, or the research that you could perhaps do for them, we get into this contract negotiation phase, and that can be tough. Sometimes at universities, it seems like every university lawyer wants to look at the contract and read it through before it can be approved. And as a researcher with perhaps not a lot of strong understanding of contracts, this can be tough, particularly for the first time that you're working with an industry partner. The next issue that I see researchers face trying to engage with industry is time, and this has 2 components. I guess the first thing is our respective views on time. When industry talk about a long project, they think about 3 months, but when researchers talk about a long project, they're probably thinking more like 3 or 5 years, and so those issues around time can prevent meaningful progress. The other issue around time is just how long it takes to get stuff done. That might be that we take longer than we expect to do the work, we take longer than expect to get the contract sorted, and so in the end, time kills the collaboration. Related to contracts is this idea of ownership of IP, and I think it comes up many times for researchers, even in collaborations between universities and researchers. And how do we deal with that, and how do we make sure that everyone who's involved in the collaboration understands what IP they bring to the collaboration, as well as the IP that the collaboration itself develops. And the final issue that I see is communication, and this is before, during, and after the partnership. We all make assumptions around what our partners should or shouldn't know, and perhaps that prevents meaningful progress as well. We think that our partners don't need to know something, when in actual fact that might be a key idea on why they were originally engaged, or that might be something that changes the way they operate as an industry partner. So from our perspective, I guess the question is, what do you see as the hardest part about accessing opportunities and funding for industry grants? You can type into the chat there, what do people find as the hardest thing, or any of those things resonating with you?
So, Richard, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name's Jane Anderson. I'm just going to be collaborating with Richard today. And Richard, I'm not sure if you can see the comments that are coming through. And thanks to everyone who's contributing. We've got Robin, thanks so much. We've got Mike on board. We've got Emma as well. So a few of the comments coming through are that we've got being able to identify partners, and the other one is finding where grants are offered. So how do I even find out where they are? Are they some of the things that you find, Richard, as well?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people say, well, how do we support the industry collaboration that might help? So either directly fund the collaboration or, to set up some pilot work.
Okay.
Okay, so my name's Richard. I guess I help researchers from universities primarily, but across industry as well, to address the three challenges that I see them face: funding for their research, writing about their research in proposals or grants, as well as being relevant to their partners, relevant to their funders, relevant to their potential collaborators. And as Jane said, Jane and I are doing this together. Jane, you can introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, thanks for being online today. So I'm a personal branding expert and essentially a communications consultant. So I work with large organisations and solopreneurs, people who are experts in their field, and particularly helping them have more presence, whether it's face-to-face or online. So my space is really I work with research institutes, universities, people like Deakin, UQ, Griffith. I head up to the Philippines to work with the International Rice Research Institute up there. And so my work is helping people who really are those experts in their space to be able to access and connect and engage with those people who need their help. So whether that's industry partners, collaborate with Richard in the academic arena, but for those who are trying to work out particularly this LinkedIn space, in how do we use that to be able to create those connections. So I do a lot of work with sales teams and people who use LinkedIn. So I've recently written the book on that, and I'm also a mentor on the Thought Leaders Business School, where I particularly help people who are experts in their space. So I think I keep going on here, don't I? So what we're going to cover today is, we've only got a short period of time with you today, so we want to give you as much as we possibly can. So what we'd like to do is to have a look at what are the specific key tools that will help you to access industry on LinkedIn and to create those collaborations and other opportunities. We thought today what we would do is to give you really the three key secrets that really create those opportunities for researchers. So whether you're a researcher yourself or you're in charge of a team of researchers, and also how to speak the language that industry speak on LinkedIn, because it's, as you would probably know, it's a little bit different perhaps than the space that you're working in all the time. And also to give you an idea on how you can showcase your knowledge to become a trusted advisor in industry. So there are people out there who really want to be able to work with you. We've just got to make it really easy for them. So we're just going to, I guess the first question we've got, we just want to create a little bit of permission. We've got lots to give you. So we want to be able to make sure that we're going to move fairly quickly. So you probably find we'll speak fairly fast, and it's not that that's our favourite thing to do, but we want to give you as much as we possibly can. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to make this session today really interactive as much as possible too. So we're going to be asking you questions. So on that right hand side, hopefully you've been on a webinar before, but you should be able to see the drop down or control panel on the side where you can jot in your question or comments. So really keen to get your feedback. And towards the end, we're going to also put in a question and answer time so that you can ask any more. So feel free to jot your questions in there because I'll refer to them towards the end as well. And the other thing that we'll do at the end is, so today sort of just to give you a bit of an overview and some of the things you might need to think about. We'll also, if it's okay with you, we're happy to share at the end if you want to find out more information or you want to be able to get some more help, then we'll point you in the right direction for that as well. So I might let you go here, Richard.
Yeah. So I guess all of you, or you might know who this is. This is Elon Musk, the head of Tesla car manufacturer and a bunch of other, I guess, innovations or initiatives. One of the things that he did recently was he was sort of sick of the space race, as it were, and decided he was going to solve the problem himself. So what he did, he took control and he used his influence, his positioning, to go out and look for people that he felt were experts in developing whatever was necessary to put people into space at a not just a industrial level, but at an individual and commercial level. And so he basically used his own positioning and then identified others who were well positioned in the space to then build what is a crack team to beat big companies such as Virgin and other governments already in this field to the idea of putting people into space. And so I guess what the point of this is to show that your positioning, you might not know who's looking for you, but they are out there looking, and you just need to make it easy for them to find you. And one of those things is through positioning. Why don't you...
Sorry, Richard. It's just transferred over to you. I just realised I hadn't done that for you. Oh, I shouldn't have done. There you go.
Right.
Sorry.
No problems.
So, presenters.
And the other thing, I guess, that we also see, everyone on this call is probably aware of the National Innovation and Science Agenda. It's our shiny new thing, I guess, at the moment. And, we've been told, if not necessarily before the election, after the election, we'll have to start getting ready to work more closely with industry. I'm sure you're all aware that as of next week, I think technically it will be Saturday, we'll be able to submit linkage grants and have them assessed as we go. And so there's a massive push, not just from industry to work with them, but from the government's perspective, for universities to work more closely with industry in whatever guise that might look like. And there's going to be changes to funding that further support that. For those of you that aren't aware, ARC grant success rates, depending on what field you're in, down around sort of the 20%, 20 to 25% rate, whereas, and the same is also true for NHMRC success rates. But when you look at success rates for things like linkage grants or the NHMRC equivalent, the partnership grants, they're getting closer to 40% and 50%. So just by having an industry partner, you can increase your chances of grant success, let alone trying to get industry specifically to fund a project. But one of the things that I guess comes back, or that I see in the work that I do as well, is that industry can sometimes look at academia as sort of the ivory tower, the inaccessible place, as it were. Some people might use the idea of coffee, and for those of you that are in Melbourne, you'll know that we love our coffee. And basically, in Fitzroy recently, a new coffee house started serving what they described as deconstructed coffee, where they basically served you up hot water, some extracted coffee, and some warm milk, and you were, sort of putting it together. And I think sometimes as academics we can be a bit like that, a bit not recognisable as what we are as good researchers, whereas what we need to be closer to is Nescafe, not necessarily cheap and nasty, but the idea that it's accessible, that people understand what it is that they're getting. Perhaps we could consider ourselves more like Nespresso, a half-decent coffee, but it's quick and easy, and we know what we're getting. And industry generally aren't hanging out on ResearchGate. They can't get by some of the data walls that are present in research, and so as researchers, we need to make it much, much easier for industry to get access to us.
All right. So I think, and along with that, I think if I come sort of from that commercial space, if you think about like why does all this matter now, particularly for those who are in the commercial arena. So for what's happening with them, and you're probably finding this too, but the average person, the research that I've read recently is around 150 to 200 emails a day that are coming through to people. So the amount of noise that we're having to cut through is just extraordinary. And around, even if you look in 2013, 200 million people joined the internet, which is really 200 million. That's just extraordinary. But then if you look at where people are spending their time, that people have shifted from the 2 hours a day on television over to 2 hours a day onto social media. Now you might blame Farmer Wants a Wife, you might blame those funeral insurance ads or Home and Away, but the shift that it is to information consumption, but that information consumption of where industry partners are hanging out is particularly on LinkedIn. And if we look at the amount of people that have joined LinkedIn and the opportunity that it presents is incredible. So the way that we access people has really changed. And I think, as Richard said, in this space, what I probably noticed from the commercial side is, I might get you to move to the next slide for me, Richard. I just can't seem to move it. Yep. So this is about, I think, as Richard said, I think the coffee explanation is good, is that this is about moving into the space where your customers buy and where industry buy or where they hang out. So whilst you might like to be in the exclusive boutique, that's a little bit inaccessible. We've got to get right front and center in front of the customer of where they buy. And it's almost like moving into the supermarket, but not as in to commoditize you, but to put you into a space on a shelf right at eye level that makes it really easy for them to find you and make you visible for them, because otherwise they can't connect with you and they find it too hard. So industry's really created, I might get you to go to the next slide for me, Richard. Thank you. So LinkedIn, hopefully you're on there and you know what we mean by LinkedIn, but it really allows you to access those industry partners. So particularly, you get that access to the personal interactions. So my experience is, so I've been developing profiles since 2010. Most of my time now is spent training social media managers and marketing managers in how to write, and copywriters. So I was one of the first writers in Australia for writing profiles. So there's a whole lot of algorithms that sit in the back end. But what I've noticed is that people really want to connect with people. So organizations don't necessarily collaborate with organizations, people collaborate with people. And so people are sort of trying to get over or past, yes, you might work for a research or university, but who am I dealing with? Who are you? Where are you from? What's your background? What's your area of expertise? So they're trying to sort of climb over. They still acknowledge the brands there, but they want to know who you are and what's your area of expertise, particularly if you're the one who has done the research and you've got and you're the guru in this space. And when I think about this and about who you've got access to, Richard was telling me recently about a gentleman called Stephen Tomasic. Now, Stephen he's the CEO of Trajan Scientific and Medical, and they design, manufacture, and market scientific and medical devices. And, even he was saying he gets a phenomenal amount of emails every day, and he's probably up around the 200 mark. And he said, but when there's something that comes through that I really value and I've got to pay attention to, particularly if it's someone from a university. So as he said here, he said, if somebody from a university contacts me via LinkedIn, I take notice, I review their profile and I reply. And that's much better performance than on email for him. So he's valuing it and prioritizing it. And so I think what sometimes can be the perception of something like LinkedIn is that it's a recruitment tool. So it can seem a bit like it's an online resume or something like that. Or it can seem a bit like, oh, well, why would I do that if I've got Twitter? Or maybe do I just need to have a website? Why would I bother having it? Or is it even a website? And the reality is that it's not any of those three things at all. It really sits in isolation and it's quite different. And I say it's a little bit like a validator. I don't know if you've been on TripAdvisor and you've booked a holiday before or you've done a bit of research. And so it's a bit like TripAdvisor where if you're going on holidays and you're looking at a hotel, you've kind of got, all the beautiful brochure that's online or the beautiful photography and all that. So that's kind of the equivalent of the institute you're working with. But I want to sort of get to know what's really going on. I get to see the real person. And so on TripAdvisor, if I'm comparing the hotel, I get to go on and I get to see the real photos. I get to see the photos that some of the tourists have taken, or I get to really get a feel by reading what people have said about the hotel there, that I can get a real sense. I can see ratings and all those types of things. So I get to have a better sense of what the real side of that hotel is. And when you look at how people make decisions about working with you, this research was from Forrester, and I after doing this work with Richard, this is what I found, certainly in a commercial sense, and after working with Richard, I'd say the same has been the same with the work that he's done, and that is around 90% of a decision is made before somebody gets in contact with you. So there's a whole bunch of decisions that are being made, and that comes from, on average, around 10 pieces of content are consumed before that decision is made. So that means things like websites. It means getting to know who you are. What is the research that you've done? Like all those, there are all lots of pieces of content that are consumed before that even happens. So we've got to make sure that we create the tools to make that work. And what is this really about? What it's really about, it's about opportunity. And it's about the opportunity for researchers to be able to get in front of industry. And Richard, I think you said that around Richard, you said you've got about 500 contacts. Is that right?
Yeah. So I've got probably over 500 contacts, I think, and about 80% of those are researchers. But really, if you're familiar with LinkedIn, you get a feed, and the majority of my feed comes from the 20% of people who are not from research. So, what I see on LinkedIn is that there's a massive opportunity for researchers to start posting information about what it is that they do, what's important to them, how they would like to interact with industry, and ways that they would like to translate their research or work with industry for, rather than just constantly working perhaps through journal articles or even ResearchGate, which only has 9 million members. I think you were saying that there's 420 odd million members, maybe more, for LinkedIn.
Yeah, there's 420, so 9 million you said on ResearchGate recently for Australia, 6 million in Australia on LinkedIn, 6 million plus. The average user is around 37 years old with $87,000 per year income. So these are generally people who are decision executives and above. LinkedIn was originally created for CEOs, and then it's moved down the chain a little bit. The interesting thing, I think these three pieces of data, that the average user spends 17 minutes per day on the site, and 40% of users check it every day. So this is where they are hanging out. And interestingly, in terms of the content, only 1% of members write content. So whilst it might seem there are more, and even if you look at last year for organisations, $118 billion was spent last year in content marketing, and this year $135 billion will be spent. But the best thing about LinkedIn is that content that you have access to being able to write is totally free. And you can put this in front of your industry partners, so it doesn't cost you anything. And I think one of the things we find when we're working with clients is that when we're looking at profiles, is sometimes it can be hard to know where do you fit, like how do you know whether your profile is any good or not. And in the translation space, I say the profile is a little bit like a magnet. You can see on the left-hand side here, you've got a profile that either repels or attracts people. And when you look at the bottom, for a profile that repels people, it will generally they'll generally not have an account at all, or they'll have an account, but they don't know how it got there. My dad falls into this category. So, but over on the right-hand side, you can see this is a measurement of how much opportunity there is in that person's profile. So if you go from sort of not having an account, the next level, say number 3 there, is around an account that looks a bit more like it's probably a resume. It's more focused on the person's past. It probably sounds like I'm at your funeral if I read it out loud. It might sound a bit like an obituary. But as you move up the scale, you can start to see it moves. Have I got a profile that's a bit more positioned, and it's positioning me for my future, and it's positioning based on the projects that I would like to be working on. I'm really active, so I'm visible, and people can access me. Or are you an influencer where you are putting translating some of your research? Are you connecting with those people? And then the ninja is where you're doing all those things. You're positioned really well. You're focused on the projects that you want to be doing. You know what scripts or what conversation to start to be able to progress those conversations. And you're also taking your research and data that you've worked on, and you've put it into a format, or you've translated it into a format that a commercial or industry can understand. So I think one of the questions we've got is, we're curious to probably find out, where do you think you might sit at the moment? And so I'm just going to, hopefully you can see a poll on your screen. And it says, what type of LinkedIn profile do you think you have? So if you can select one of the following. So maybe you have an account, you've got one, but you don't really know what to do with it. Maybe you have a resume, but it looks a bit more like an obituary. Are you positioned? So your profile is branded and positioning you for your future, as opposed to focusing on credibility in the past. Is it more active? Have you had your presence, like you're visible every day and you're relevant and you're consistent? Or do you feel like you're a ninja and you've got all those things happening, plus you're reaching out to people? So let's have a look at the results and just see how everybody's gone. So I might get you to scroll. Next, Richard. Oh, I've got to share the results here, sorry. Okay, so let's have a look. So 44, no one says they've got an account, don't really know what to do with it. 44% have said they've got a resume, but it looks a bit like an obituary. 22% have said I'm positioned, my profile is branded based on my future, and 33% have said that I have presence, I've got relevance, and I've got consistency. And we don't have any ninjas just yet. All right, thank you for filling that out. So that's interesting. So for those who have resumes, your focus in our time together today is to focus on, as opposed to the past, what you've done, and too much on credibility, is focusing on the future and where you're trying to go. If your profile is more around positioning and you're there, this is now about making sure that you can be found. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. LinkedIn is a search engine, so we have to make sure that it's based on what you want to be doing as opposed to what you have done. And for those who are active, your focus next is to really focus on reaching out, and not just being passive, but reaching out to be able to talk to people. So, all right, so I'm just going to, whoops, are we on my screen here? Okay, Thanks, Richard. So your profile is a little bit like a mirror. So based on whatever is in your profile, it will come back to you. So in other words, if your profile is written based on your past, if it's more like an obituary based on what you have done in the past, then you're going to have more people approach you for that. And also, if you go to approach people for those things you want to be working on and it has more of that past, it's not going to make sense to them. The average person makes a decision about your profile in 3 to 4 seconds. So you have to really be able to connect and it has to make sense to them, because you're the person who's in the industry looking at it. They need to see themselves in your profile. And if they can't, then the opportunities won't be able to come your way. So over to you, Richard.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit, Jane's used this metaphor before, and if some of you have been in our courses, you'll have seen this as well. So that it's a bit like a shopping centre. You need to make sure that your shop front is clean and tidy, that it's selling what you want to sell, if that's a metaphor that we can use. It's what you look like from the outside. So LinkedIn obviously is going to be part of your profile that people see. In this day and age, social media is quite a large part of what people look at before they come and find you. We've all, I'm sure, Googled our potential collaborators before we go and look for them. And it's important that your LinkedIn profile matches what you're trying to say about yourself. And some people have also taken this to their university online page as well. And in this scenario, of course, LinkedIn is all about the industry connection. So you'll probably find a lot more industry people looking at your LinkedIn profile than, say, your potential university collaborators. And if we take a look at perhaps how someone has used their profile to gain access to other industries or other areas, Dr. Emily is an IT expert. And basically she used her positioning in IT to leverage some work she wanted to do in health. And so now she works with departments of health and healthcare providers of various sizes as an IT health expert, particularly around big data. So the leap is not massive. I'm for sure we're all aware around the relationship between IT and health. But because she made an outward post around her desire to work with health and her IT expertise, LinkedIn helped to leverage that, and like she said here, to have possibilities for collaboration and some great conversation around IT and health. And for researchers in particular, I think the opportunity or positioning is not necessarily easy, but it's easier than most other people on LinkedIn because we already have a system that positions ourselves relatively high on the educational scale. And in this sort of tongue-in-cheek picture shows that professors are at the top of the academic tree, but they're also at the top of other trees as well, the research tree in general, and people recognise the positioning that comes with being a professor. And so you can use that to your advantage on LinkedIn. So if you have a title that is professor, I'd strongly encourage you to put that into your LinkedIn title. And for those of us that aren't professors but are doctors, I'd strongly, again, encourage you to put that into your title. And you'll see if you've looked at my LinkedIn profile that I've put doctor into my title as well. And the same for associate professors, etc. So the question that you need to ask yourself as you build your profile, what is it that you're trying to achieve? So if you want industry partners, how would you build your profile to attract those? Opportunities to license or translate your research, make sure that you're clear in your description and summary that that's what you're after. Or are you just trying to find collaborators from another university? And that's okay too, but then you just should be clear in describing that in your profile. So just a quick check-in, if people could type in what are you trying to achieve with your LinkedIn profile, either now or after this webinar. What do you think the focus will be? Would it be getting industry partners specifically, licensing or translating your work? So
I'm just keeping an eye out, Richard, just to see what some are looking for. So Some are saying, yes, I'm looking for, they're jotting it in the questions area. So some have said, yes, I'm looking just specifically for an industry partner. Some have said, I'm looking for a collaborator from another university. And we've got someone, someone has said the word license, so looking to license. Okay.
So then what you might do in your profile then is say something like, I've worked with, and describe the type of people that you've worked with, but also they would necessarily be the people that you would want to work with in the future. So my profile says I've worked with researchers, directors of research, deputy vice chancellors. Your profile might say I've worked with R&D developers, I've worked with this industry, or I've worked with that partner, so that when people, like Jane said, when people read your profile, they see themselves in your profile, and it makes it easy to connect. And if at this point you don't have an industry partner, then you might talk about the kinds of roles that would be ideal for you to work with. So I would like to work with R&D, I would like to work with product developers, I would like to work with system researchers, I would like to work with whatever it might be. So the next is about partners, and I guess so LinkedIn can help get partners, and like with positioning, you need to think about and create your profile to match what you're looking for. Do you want them to be close, or doesn't it matter? And from the perspective of successful collaborations, we know from the data that industry research collaborations are more successful when the partners are in close geographic location than when they're further apart. So perhaps you need to say in your profile that you're after, or that you're based in Melbourne, or that you're based in Sydney, or that you're based in Australia, because that will potentially increase the chances of a successful collaboration. Then what do you want to do with your partners? Like we said, is it licensing? Is it direct translation? Are we talking about your expertise? Do we want to talk about our research output? Do we want to talk about our research process? Are we doing it fee for service? What are the different things that we are hoping to get from our partnership? Do you want your partner to have a shared interest, or does it really not matter as long as they are interested in supporting that specific piece of research? And I think this is another tongue-in-cheek look at the academic pathway, and I think we're all used to the idea of thinking about what other people want from our research, and we just need to turn our mind when we work with industry to what does industry want. And so we can do research around that. We can look at what our potential industry partners are currently interested in, what the problems that they face might be, and then use our LinkedIn profile to pose the question and answer the problem, or to describe the solution that we might have to their problem. As we go through our research life, we see as graduate or PhD students, we're focused on what our supervisor wants, and as we move up the scale, we're looking at very tenure committees or grant committees. And so from a perspective of wanting to engage with industry, we now need to go and find out what they want. I think we work very hard to find out what it makes a good grant, but when it comes to working with industry, sometimes we can lack, or industry partners, sometimes we can lack trying to actually actively find out what they want. And so industry does put that kind of stuff out, and we can use LinkedIn to help find that too. We can search LinkedIn for our partners, and we can look through LinkedIn for what our partners are talking about. As an example of how you might be able to find a novel partner, we did some work with the Royal District Nursing Service, and as part of that, one of the participants, her name's Claudia, she said, a person's invited me to connect, they're from the mining industry, what should I do? And we sort of said, well, it depends on whether you're interested in working with mining, but what is it that you're currently interested in? The response was, I look at falls prevention. So immediately there was, to Jane and I, a bit of a connection between falls prevention and mining. Now, whether Claudia wants to work with the mining industry is up to her, but nonetheless, the use of her keywords around falls prevention allowed what you might have not necessarily thought of as a partner, now connecting with her on LinkedIn to discuss her research expertise. So I think it's important to consider what keywords would your ideal industry partner use to find you. So for example, when I was doing my PhD, I was working on phosphofructokinases, and I'm not sure that I'd ever put phosphofructokinase into my LinkedIn profile, but I might use words like cell signaling or cancer or cell-to-cell communication. For Jane, her focus is on lead generation, but again, even in LinkedIn, lead generation is not necessarily a search term that people would use, but they do use sales. So I guess from your perspective, you need to think about, well, what is it that I'm an expert in, and what word would industry use to find that expertise? And bear in mind that could be not just the endpoint, but the methodologies you use as well. So we've covered off positioning, we've covered off partners. The next thing to cover off is the projects that you might want to work on. And I guess it's thinking about, do we want to make a big impact or a small impact? And that's up to you. But regardless, then the projects that you put forward or that you think you want to work with industry have to be relevant. And I use this example of a recently completed tunnel under the Swiss Alps that's cutting transport time, cutting travel time, reducing pollution, reducing cost, that was completed on time and on budget, surprisingly, for a construction project. And then you compare that to what's happened recently in Victoria, where we've spent essentially $1 billion to build the road to nowhere, to not build a tunnel that is far less complex and far less difficult to do. And so, you know, I use that example to basically say, you know, what are the projects that you're interested in? What are the projects that that industry want that you as a researcher might be able to put forward? Does the community want that kind of work? Like I said before, it could be your research output, but don't discount the body of knowledge that you already have. It could be a research method that you think is not necessarily that useful, but it is to industry, or it could even be teaching industry about research, for example. So, you know, the other things that you need to think about as well in terms of research projects and how you describe them on LinkedIn is the length. Like I said before, time is a big killer, and we need to talk, you know, be specific around time. What would the focus be? What's the academic value to you? Obviously, you don't want to propose a project that has no academic value to you. And what's the industry value? And who might be part of the project? You know, is that you and one other partner, you and several partners, you and an entire sector? All those things be taken into account. At a LinkedIn training session we did at LIMS at La Trobe University in Melbourne, a couple of the people attended, and when we talked to them about the same thing, what projects were they interested in, we had a director of a research platform there, and Matthew, he was interested in promoting his research platform, but not just to industry, but also to researchers. So now the way he's using LinkedIn is to talk about the capabilities of his platform, the findings that his platform has helped support, and things like that. Similarly, there was another lady in the room who was interested in a methodology that she had developed, a thing all around working out the testing injectables in a preclinical model. And so for her, the connection with industry was not about the end result, it was about the process. You know, I can help industry do preclinical testing if that's what they would like. Not necessarily prior to a full-blown clinical trial, but certainly in leading up to drug target development, etc. So just need to think about what it is that you might want to do, and then what does that mean for how you describe yourself on LinkedIn and how you make use of LinkedIn. So in summary today, I think LinkedIn can help you in 3 areas, or you need to focus on 3 areas. The first is positioning. What does my profile look like? What does it look like when I post? How do people look at when they look at my LinkedIn profile? What are they likely to think about me? The second is thinking about your partners and the partners that you'd like. And so within your profile, how are you describing the people that you have worked with previously, or the people that you would like to work with? And finally is, what projects would you like to work on, and how can you include a short description of those in both the summary on your profile and the kinds of things that you like and comment on LinkedIn. And ultimately, I think together, those three things can, you lead to innovative results, including novel partners, like I already said, RDNS potentially combining with a mining company that would never have been thought of previously. And I think the opportunities for using LinkedIn for research translation are there. We just need to get out there and make more use of LinkedIn.
All right, so I'm happy to go here. All right, so as we said, if you would like more information, we're going to stay online and answer some questions shortly. But if you do want some more information, Richard and I have put together a one-day masterclass. It's a public class. We generally only do this internally for universities and research institutes, but because we've had a few people and individuals asking, we thought we would put the public masterclass on. So it's going to be on Wednesday, the 3rd of August in Melbourne. And the three areas that we're really going to cover are specifically those areas. We're going to cover off on your positioning. I might get you to go to the next slide for me, Richard. So the next one after that. Yep, that's it. So we're really going to focus on the first part will be around that positioning. So to get a profile that is built that really sings to that person who is in industry looking at it, they make a decision in 3 to 4 seconds. So it really has to stand out and connect with them. And also how LinkedIn is a search engine. So how to build the keywords into the algorithms so that you turn up in those search results and be easy to find. The second part that we'll do is certainly the how to access partners, so how to find them using key search terms, and then once you've got that, knowing what to say to them. Quite often we find people who can go, oh wow, look, we found this person, that's fantastic, now what do I say to them? So giving you the tools to be able to have the conversation and know what to say that translate for industry to understand. And then the third part that we'll certainly cover off on is how to get clarity and take action towards those projects. I might get you to flip the next point for me. Yeah, on the projects that you want to be working on with industry so that they align with the projects that they have in mind as well. So if you're interested in coming along, we've put the price together for $9.95. We're only just taking a small group because we want to give a lot of personal attention. And the link will be here. But if you want me to send you the information on it, if you could just pop into the questions box, just say yes, please, or please send me the info or whatever it might be. But put yes, please, and I might get you to click the next. The link is there. I've put it on Eventbrite, but I'm happy to send it out to you if you are interested in attending, or perhaps there might be a group of you if you're interested. And I've also put, that's interesting formatting. And then I just thought I would share Professor Matthew Perugini. He was from LIMS, which was the La Trobe Institute of Molecular Science. And so he was the one, we did quite a lot of work with him and his team. And so we did the day workshop with him. And then we did the day with Amy Morgans and her team. Richard's done a lot of work with RDNS. And for them, it was really about helping them become accessible and even more professional online to be able to create those opportunities. So if you would like more information, just pop yes, please into the question box, and then I can make sure I send some information to you. So we're just going to stop there and use the last few minutes to be able to answer some questions. So to put in your question, you can pop it in the questions box, and I will certainly read it out loud for you, and we can happily answer it. Or equally, if you would like to do it verbally, you're very welcome to put your hand up. Hopefully you can see that on the control panel there. And if you click on the hand, you'll be able to see that the hand will raise, and we're more than happy to listen to your question, hear your question. You could say it out loud, and we're more than happy to answer that for you. So while they're coming through, I think some of the other...
Got one already.
got some? Okay, great.
Yeah, so
Fire
one
away.
of the questions was, are you going to suggest how we go from past to future?
In the program, we certainly will, which is around the positioning, but happy to touch on that. Do you want me to touch on that,
Yeah, yeah, go.
Richard?
Yeah, you can write
Okay.
that.
Okay. So there are a few things that create the positioning to be able to help you connect with that audience. And so, first of all, it's the shift from the past to the future. So one of the things I find a lot with profiles is that their profiles, particularly in the research space, is that there's a lot of focus on credibility, which is fantastic, but it needs to sing to the alignment with where the organization is trying to go, and it also needs to match what they understand. So with the positioning, there's a few things. One is the search engine optimization. So you have to be really easily found. So in the program, we show you how to test the search engine optimization and also find the words that industry are looking for, so that we can make sure that the words match. Because otherwise, if you're not easy to be found, then that puts a lot more pressure on you to reach out. So that's the first part of positioning. The second part of positioning is that in terms of in that 3 to 4 seconds, they make a decision about how you fit into their world. And a few aspects of that are things like some of the results that you've achieved, or what your research has found, what you would ideally like to be working on. We also cover off on some things like social proof. Um, and also about some other samples and how your content strategy works, so that it matches and draws those opportunities to you. So certainly in terms of that positioning, is there anything I haven't covered there in the positioning side, Richard?
I guess like the question is, how do you go from past to future?
Mm,
I think I would think of that as use what you've done in the past and that you'd like to do in the future to describe yourself on LinkedIn. So, for example, from my perspective, I've done a whole lot of work around writing grants and whatnot, but I might not necessarily want to continue to write grants. But I have helped as part of that process help write business plans that have then been used for grants. So if I want to focus more on business plans, I'll make sure that I write about business plans in my profile, but not necessarily around the grant writing, because otherwise I'll be continually found for grant writing. And so that's how I've used, what I've done in the past to focus on the future. But if you don't have anything that you've done in the past, but that you want to do in the future, if that makes sense, then you can be overt and say, I'm looking for opportunities too, and describe what the future opportunity would be like.
And I think another example of that one, I can't remember who asked it, but is that I think we had somebody in one of the groups who had done a lot of work in she'd done it was in uh, metabolism and diabetes,
Oh,
and
yes, yes.
she was wanting to do more work, collaborate with people. It was particularly in China, but her profile was all based on really access, like you were talking about location, Richard, and her profile
Yes.
really sung to people who were more Australian based. And so she was finding it hard to be able to access. And once we found where those people were, so the first thing was helping her to be able to find those people, but then the second part was that her profile was positioned so that those people that she approaches in China, because it's that whole first impression. If we don't get the first impression right, then
Mm.
that unconscious bias kicks in. So what she
Yeah.
had to do was reposition her profile so that it matched the conversation she was having with people in China. Because what would happen is when they land on her profile, they go, well, I don't really understand, because your profile really talks more to about all the work that you've been doing in Melbourne. I don't really get it. So it means that would have been a lot of hard work for her, and she wouldn't have been getting the results.
Yeah.
That's a good
And
question.
on that point, um, about the Chinese example as well, from what I understand, you can translate your profile into Mandarin, I believe.
Yes.
And you were telling me as well that LinkedIn is one of the few social media sites that is available in China.
Yeah, that's right. So we noticed that you can translate your profile into any other language, or I've seen what some people have done is that they have their profile in English and created components and been able to put parts in that are in Mandarin or a different language. But it's interesting if you look at, in her case, China was interesting because she's on WeChat, but it's not necessarily a really easy platform to get it to work in this space with the research and translation space, because it wasn't able to
Yeah.
showcase her work well enough. So we said, well, keep your WeChat going, but make sure that you have all your positioning and branding so it goes towards your LinkedIn, because it amplifies your expertise better.
Yeah.
But if you look at in China, they don't have access to Facebook, but they do have access to LinkedIn. And now that LinkedIn is going through this acquisition into Microsoft, they've just been announced that the acquisition will happen. They're paying $26.2 billion for it, which is phenomenal. So it will be interesting to see what that means for the that access to markets like that now.
I saw another question earlier, which was more a logistics one around the recording of this, and yes, we have hit record, so we'll make that available.
Yep, that's fine. We can. So after the webinar today, if you've jumped on today, we'll send you a link, and you'll be able to watch it, or welcome to pass it on to any of your colleagues. That's totally fine. And you are very welcome to connect with myself or Richard on LinkedIn. I've written quite a few blogs on some of the specific technicalities behind LinkedIn as well. There's a few blogs I've written on positioning and what to say to people as well. So you're very welcome to have a look at my profile or have a look at some of the blogs. I think the formatting of the blogs, and even on yours, Richard, it can even give you the sense of here's what people are looking at, here's what people are reading. And I think sometimes you can get caught up in the metrics, so how many people like something or comment. But in LinkedIn, having written so many profiles and being able to help people build their businesses, I have my own business runs entirely through LinkedIn. I have a website, but I don't rely on it very much. But what I've found is that if you have your content, even just those blogs, which in your case is the translation space, it's about access and it's about the visibility. So I can get a sense of, there's 10 pieces of content before I get that feel that, oh yeah, okay, I think you could work with us. I think you're on the same page as us and you would understand us if I'm coming from industry.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? I'm trying to look through the list.
Yeah, I think we got them all. I think industry partners. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, we got some yes pleases. If you can send me some information. And okay. I think we got everyone.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much for coming along today. If you do have any further questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with us, but we'll send this all through for you. Have a fantastic afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you perhaps on LinkedIn and seeing you putting your information out there and access to industry.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Richard.
Bye.